The phone rang in Majorca, and when Rafael Nadal picked up, he heard panic in the voice on the other end. The Linz Open, a tournament that had run for 35 years, was on the verge of financial collapse. The stadium that should have been buzzing for its anniversary edition was almost empty. Sponsors were threatening to pull their millions, and the reason, according to the desperate tournament director, was simple. Ayala wasn't playing. The 20-year-old Filipina had dropped from number 29 to number 45 in the rankings after her crushing loss to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open. But the sponsors didn't care about rankings. They cared about the 48% ticket surge in Dubai when she played. They cared about the 57% merchandise share in Miami when her jersey outsold every other player. They cared about the 115 million Filipinos who had proven they would follow their hero anywhere. And now, they were demanding that the WTA give Eala a wild card, or they would pull their funding entirely. The WTA, facing a crisis of its own making, was forced to relent. And when Nadal heard what happened, the King of Clay could only shake his head. "I've never seen anything like this," he said, and the tennis world agreed. The Upper Austria Ladies Linz tournament was celebrating its 35th edition in 2026. For more than 3 decades, it had been a reliable stop on the WTA Tour, drawing modest but respectable crowds, generating steady revenue, and providing a platform for players to shine on European clay. The tournament had moved to indoor red clay for the first time in its history, a surface change designed to attract top players and breathe new life into the event. The prize money pool had been increased, everything was in place for a successful 35th anniversary celebration. But when the pre-sale numbers came in, the celebration turned to panic. Ticket sales had collapsed. The sessions that should have been sold out, the quarterfinals, the semifinals, the final, were barely half full. The stadium that should have been buzzing with anticipation for the clay court swing was eerily quiet. The tournament was facing a financial loss that could threaten its future. The cause was clear to everyone in the room. The Ayala Effect, the phenomenon of packed stadiums, crashing ticket systems, and unprecedented merchandise sales that followed Ayala wherever she played, had been absent from Linz. The 20-year-old Filipina was not in the main draw. Her ranking had dropped from number 29 to number 45 after her crushing 4th-round loss to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open. The 390 points she earned from her magical 2025 semifinal run had expired, replaced by just 120 points for her 4th-round finish. And without her, the fans who had turned tournaments into celebrations of Filipino pride simply didn't show up. The irony was not lost on tournament officials. They had spent 35 years building relationships with local sponsors and media. They had invested in marketing campaigns, player development, and facility upgrades. The field still included notable names: Ekaterina Alexandrova, the defending champion, Klara Tauson, Lyudmila Samsonova, Yelena Ostapenko. But none of that mattered. The fans had not come for Alexandrova or Ostapenko, they had come for Ayala, and when she wasn't there, they stayed home. By the time the tournament organizers realized the full extent of the crisis, it was almost too late. The empty seats were not just an embarrassment, they were a financial disaster in the making. The tournament was projected to lose millions, and the sponsors, who had invested heavily based on projections that assumed Ayala would be in the draw, were demanding answers. The statistics that tournament officials reviewed in their emergency meeting were devastating. The Eala Effect had been documented for months, but seeing the numbers laid out in black and white made the crisis feel even more urgent. In Dubai, earlier in the season, ticket sales had jumped 48% year-on-year, a spike directly attributable to Ayala's presence. Tournament director Salah Talak had admitted she attracted a new demographic to the tennis, and the stadium was sold out for all her matches. People were desperately trying to get tickets, but they were all gone. We've never seen anything like it. At the Australian Open in January, Ayala's first-round match on Court 6 drew queues that wrapped around Melbourne Park, forcing security to turn away hundreds of fans. Her pre-tournament press conference drew 196,000 views, more than 6 times the views of Carlos Alcaraz and nearly 20 times the views of world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka. At the Miami Open, Ayala's jersey sales accounted for 57% of all merchandise sold, more than every other player in the field combined. The ticket system crashed on the day sales opened, overwhelmed by demand from Filipino fans. Every session featuring Ayala sold out within hours. The finals, by contrast, would never be full. The pattern was consistent across every tournament she entered. When Ayala played, stadiums filled. When she didn't, they emptied. The Eala Effect was real, it was measurable, and it was terrifying to an organization that had no idea how to handle it. On the Nothing Major podcast, former pros Sam Querrey, John Isner, and Steve Johnson had debated the phenomenon. Johnson was unequivocal. Yes, dude, it's crazy. She's having the same effect that Fonseca was having on the men's side last year in Miami, Australia. The court was standing room only. Then Dubai had standing room only. It's insane. Like, it's massive. The crowd she's getting, like all over the world, are insane. Isner confirmed the scale of the phenomenon. Yeah, it's everywhere. It's a huge Philippine market. I think a lot of people underestimated how big that market is. They finally have a star on the women's side of the game. She's obviously one to watch, just for the atmosphere. You want to tune into her matches just to see what it's like on the court. Querrey summed up their admiration, gushing that Ayala was unknown until Miami last year. I think we can all kind of agree on that, but she is just like an absolute rock star. The numbers told a story that traditional metrics couldn't capture. Ayala's ranking might be number 45. She might have never won a Grand Slam. She might have just dropped from number 29 after a crushing loss to Karolina Muchova. But her connection to the Filipino diaspora, millions of overseas Filipino workers scattered across the globe, was unlike anything the sports world had ever seen. The sponsors meeting was supposed to be routine. A review of the tournament's financial performance, a discussion of next year's plans, the usual corporate rhythm of a WTA event. But when the ticket sales numbers were presented, the atmosphere shifted. The sponsors had been watching the Ayala phenomenon for months. They had seen the 48% ticket surge in Dubai. They had watched the Miami Open ticket system crash under the weight of Filipino fans. They had reviewed the merchandise sales figures, showing Ayala's jersey outselling every other player in the field combined. And they had made a simple calculation: Ayala equals revenue. The Linz tournament, with its modest ticket sales and aging fan base, was not delivering the returns they expected. The sponsors demanded answers. When tournament officials explained that Ayala's ranking had dropped and she was not in the main draw, the response was immediate and forceful. "Get her in," one sponsor representative said. "We don't care how. Wild card, special exemption, whatever it takes. If she's not playing, we're not paying." The ultimatum sent shockwaves through the tournament organization. The WTA rules were clear. Wild cards were to be awarded at the discretion of tournament organizers, but they were typically reserved for local players or rising stars who had not yet qualified by ranking. Ayala, ranked number 45, was not eligible for a wild card under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances. The tournament was facing a financial disaster. The sponsors were threatening to withdraw, and the only solution was a player who had been excluded because her ranking had fallen too low. The irony was inescapable. The ranking system that was supposed to ensure fair competition was now threatening to destroy the tournament's financial viability. The sponsors, who had no interest in the nuances of WTA rankings, only cared about one thing: filling seats. And the only player who could guarantee that was Alex Ayala. As the Philippine star noted in an analysis of the phenomenon, Ayala has become a favorite WTA wildcard participant precisely because of the massive support she receives. Call it favoritism if you want, but thankfully, for once, it is in favor of a homegrown Filipino athlete. This is a great quid pro quo that is rarely seen in professional sports. The more we support her, the more chances she gets to play. The more she plays, the more points and prize money she earns, the higher up the ranking she climbs, and when that happens, the more opportunities we have to watch her play.
The WTA found itself in an impossible position. The rules were clear, but the financial reality was even clearer. The organization had spent years trying to grow the game, to expand into new markets, to build stars who could fill stadiums. In Ayala, they had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. The problem was that their biggest star was ranked number 45, had never won a Grand Slam, and had just dropped from number 29 after a crushing loss to Karolina Muchova. The ranking system that measured her at number 45, while the world saw her as number 1, had been exposed for what it was, a flawed metric that valued consistency over connection, wins over wonder. And the sponsors, who had no interest in the nuances of WTA rankings, were demanding that the organization adapt. The WTA's internal discussions were reportedly contentious. Some officials argued that the rules should be followed regardless of the consequences. Others pointed out that the rules were created to serve the sport, and if they were hurting the sport, they needed to be changed. The sponsors' pressure was relentless. They had invested millions in the tournament based on projections that assumed Ayala would be in the draw. Those projections had been made before her ranking dropped. Now, they were demanding that the tournament deliver on those promises by any means necessary. The decision, when it came, was unprecedented. The WTA announced that Ayala would receive a wild card into the Linz Open main draw. The official statement cited extraordinary circumstances and the player's significant contribution to the growth of women's tennis. The announcement was met with immediate backlash from some quarters. Critics argued that the WTA was bending its own rules to accommodate a player who hadn't earned her spot. Others saw it as a necessary adaptation to a changing sport. But the sponsors were satisfied. The tickets would sell. The stadium would fill. The Eala Effect would save the tournament. When news of the wildcard reached Rafael Nadal in Mallorca, his reaction was immediate and emotional. The 22-time Grand Slam champion, who had trained Ayala at his academy for 7 years, has watched her grow from a 12-year-old girl into a global phenomenon. He has seen her struggle and succeed, lose and win, face criticism and rise above it. But he had never seen anything like this. "I have been in this sport for over 20 years, Nadal said in an interview from Mallorca. I have seen tournaments come and go. I have seen players rise and fall. But I have never seen a tournament's financial viability depend on a single player who is not even in the draw. This is unprecedented." Nadal's words carried weight. He has won 22 Grand Slams, spent years at the top of the rankings, and built a reputation as one of the most respected figures in tennis. When he speaks, the tennis world listens. "Ayala has done something special," he continued. "She is connected with people in a way that few athletes ever do. The sponsors understand that. The tournament directors are beginning to understand it. But the ranking system does not measure that, and that is the problem." Nadal stopped short of criticizing the WTA directly, but his message was clear. The organization needed to adapt. The ranking system that measured players by wins and losses was not capturing the full value of athletes like Ayala, and if tournaments wanted to survive, they needed to recognize that value, even if it meant bending the rules. "I have watched Ayala since she was 12 years old," Nadal said. "She arrived at the academy so young, so far from home. She didn't speak the language, she didn't know anyone, but she had something special, a fire, a determination, a refusal to give up. To see her now, to see sponsors demanding wildcards for her, it is incredible. It is beyond anything I could have imagined." Nadal's reaction was captured on video and quickly went viral. The king of clay, who has witnessed generations of tennis history, was seen shaking his head, a smile spreading across his face. "I've never seen anything like this." and the tennis world agreed. The Linz crisis is not an isolated incident. It is a symptom of a larger problem that has been building for years. The WTA's ranking system, designed to reward consistency and results, is failing to capture the full value of players like Ayala, who connect with fans on a deeper level. The sponsors have made their position clear. They will not invest millions in tournaments that cannot fill seats, and the only player who can guarantee packed stadiums is a 20-year-old Filipina ranked number 45 in the world. The WTA now faces an impossible choice. They can stick to their rules and watch tournaments collapse, or they can adapt, bending the rules to accommodate the players who actually draw crowds. Either path carries risks. Either path will be controversial. But one thing is certain, the Eala Effect has changed tennis forever. A player's ranking is no longer the only measure of their value, and the organizations that fail to recognize that will be left behind. As the clay season begins, Linz, Stuttgart, Madrid, Rome, Roland Garros, Ayala carries with her something that no ranking can measure. The knowledge that sponsors demanded her inclusion, that tournament directors recognized her value, that the sport she loves is finally beginning to understand what she represents. The Czech curse remains unbroken. Her record on clay is modest, but she has something more powerful than any statistic: the love of a nation that will not be silenced, and the backing of sponsors who have bet their millions on her future.
The Linz Open was on the brink of financial disaster. Ticket sales had collapsed, sponsors were threatening to withdraw, the stadium that should have been buzzing for the 35th anniversary of the tournament was almost empty. And the reason, according to panicked tournament officials, was simple: Ayala wasn't playing. The 20-year-old Filipina had dropped from number 29 to number 45 in the world rankings after her crushing loss to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open. Without her in the draw, the fans who had packed stadiums from Melbourne to Miami simply didn't show up. The tournament was facing a loss that could threaten its future. Then the sponsors stepped in. In an unprecedented move, they demanded that the WTA give Ayala a wild card into the main draw. The message was clear: get her in, or we're out. The WTA, facing a crisis of its own making, relented. When Rafael Nadal heard the news, his reaction was captured on video. The 22-time Grand Slam champion, who had trained Ayala at his academy for 7 years, was seen shaking his head, a smile spreading across his face. "I've never seen anything like this," he said. The video went viral within hours. The Eala Effect had won. The ranking system had lost. Now, as Ayala prepares for the clay season, Linz, Stuttgart, Madrid, Rome, Roland Garros, she carries with her something that no ranking can measure: the knowledge that her value to the sport cannot be captured by numbers alone. The Czech curse remains unbroken. Her record on clay is modest, but she has something more powerful than any statistic: the love of a nation that will not be silenced, and the backing of sponsors who have bet their millions on her future. What do you think about the WTA being forced to give Ayala a wild card? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe now for daily WTA news, match breakdowns, and stories that go beyond the scoreline. Because at Rally Radar, every day is match day.